During the Renaissance period, which spanned roughly from the 14th to the 17th century, the question of what people drank on a daily basis reveals a great deal about the social, environmental, and technological conditions of the time. Unlike today, when clean drinking water is generally taken for granted in many parts of the world, water was frequently viewed with suspicion and caution during the Renaissance. This wary attitude stemmed from the quality and accessibility of water supplies, which were often contaminated by waste and industrial runoff, making rivers and wells sources of illness rather than reliable hydration. Consequently, people often turned to alternatives such as weak beer and cheap wine, which were not only safer, but also culturally ingrained beverages. The safety concerns surrounding water in Renaissance Europe were rooted in the practical realities of urban life. Many growing cities, including Florence, Venice, and London, faced significant challenges in managing waste. Sewage systems were either primitive or non-existent, leading to contaminated water sources. Wells and public fountains, common sources of drinking water, could easily be polluted by runoff from latrines or by nearby cesspits. The known risks of waterborne diseases such as dysentery, typhoid, and cholera created a widespread perception that untreated water was dangerous to consume. The understanding of specific pathogens was of course centuries away, but the connection between dirty water and illness was an observed reality. In contrast, beverages like weak beer and wine had several advantages that made them preferred daily drinks. While today's beers and wines often have rather high alcohol content, the varieties consumed regularly by the general population during the Renaissance were milder and less intoxicating. The brewing and fermentation processes themselves acted as a form of purification. Fermentation involves the conversion of sugars into alcohol and carbon dioxide by yeast, which inhibits the growth of many harmful microbes. The alcohol level, however low, coupled with this fermentation process, helped reduce the risk of bacterial contamination. Weak beer, sometimes called small beer or table beer, was especially popular among all classes of society. Unlike the strong, bitter ales or stouts favored by certain social groups, small beer contained a low percentage of alcohol, often between 0.5 and 2.5%. This made it safe to drink throughout the day without causing intoxication. Small beer was typically brewed from barley or other grains that were less expensive or of lower quality than those used for stronger beers, making it affordable for everyday consumption. In many households, small beer was consumed instead of water during meals or as a refreshing drink during the day. The production of weak beer was also closely linked to household and community economies. Since grain was a valuable commodity, households often brewed small beer in modest quantities using leftover grain or spent malt, the residue from stronger beer production. Monasteries and larger brewing establishments sometimes produced it as well. Its mild alcoholic content and availability made it a staple, especially in urban areas where the dangers of waterborne illness were acute. Small beer also played a role in labor environments. Workers and artisans consumed it during their shifts, as it provided both hydration and a modest energy boost from the fermentation byproducts. Wine was another commonly consumed beverage, especially in Southern Europe, where viticulture was well established. Cheap or table wine was distinct from the fine, aged wines reserved for the elite. This less expensive wine was often diluted with water, a practice that allowed people to stretch limited supplies and reduce the wine's inherent acidity and alcohol strength. The acidity of wine, combined with its alcohol content, also provided a degree of antimicrobial protection, making it safer than untreated water. Even though wine could be costly, lower quality versions were widely available and consumed by a broad spectrum of people, from peasants to townsfolk. The cultural embeddedness of wine in many Renaissance societies meant that it was more than just a beverage. It held social and culinary importance. Vineyards were a crucial part of many local economies, and wine was integral to religious rituals, celebrations, and daily meals alike. In the Mediterranean regions, for example, wine centrality went hand in hand with dietary habits that favored modest drinking rather than excess. Dilution and moderate consumption were common, driven by both cultural norms and practical considerations. These alcoholic beverages, while safer than water, were not without their own issues. The brewing and fermentation quality, storage conditions, and hygiene standards varied widely, sometimes resulting in contaminated or spoiled products. Nevertheless, on balance, weak beer and cheap wine were preferred over water because drinking untreated water carried a markedly higher risk of causing gastrointestinal illnesses and even death. This reality shaped drinking behaviors across Renaissance Europe and contributed to the unique relationship between beverages and public health. The distrust of water and reliance on fermented beverages underscore important aspects of Renaissance life. The interplay between urbanization, public health, and technology. Urban centers grew rapidly during this period, beginning to outpace the infrastructures needed to maintain clean water supplies and effective waste disposal. While some advanced cities engineered aqueducts, cisterns, and rudimentary sewage systems, these were not universally available or consistently maintained. The resulting public health hazards kept people searching for safe alternatives, with fermented drinks offering a practical, if imperfect, solution. As Renaissance thought gradually advanced into the early modern era, new ideas about science, medicine, and public health began to emerge. Observations about the relationship between dirty water and disease slowly evolved into more systematic approaches toward sanitation and water treatment. Figures like Paracelsus and later medical investigators laid the groundwork for a better understanding of contamination, though the germ theory of disease would not be fully developed and accepted until centuries later. Meanwhile, the continued popularity of beer, wine, and other fermented drinks remained a constant, testifying both to cultural tradition and pragmatic necessity. The preference for fermented beverages over water also influenced social practices and regulations. For example, taverns and alehouses became important social spaces, fostering community life while controlling the sale and distribution of beer and wine. Authorities sometimes regulated brewing and winemaking to ensure safety and quality, though enforcement varied widely. Additionally, specific types of beer or wine were associated with particular social classes, regions, and economic statuses, reflecting the rich diversity of Renaissance societies. Understanding what people drank during the Renaissance reveals much about the intersection of environment, economy, culture, and health. The widespread avoidance of untreated water in favor of weak beer and cheap wine was a practical response to genuine public health challenges and a reflection of the era's technological limitations and social customs. It also reminds us that everyday choices about something as seemingly simple as a drink can be shaped by complex forces of history and human ingenuity.